by thanking, of course, MPC, EPA, and CMAP, and the many partners that are in the room. I mean, I'm here presenting this morning just a little bit of the work that the City of Chicago's done, but really it's the work of many of the partners that we have here in the room. I mean, I'm going to be showing you some examples that will seem, I think, to some maybe new and innovative, and to others maybe simple or dated or rudimentary. So I apologize for that. There's probably a variety of experience in the room, and I wanted to just recognize that. I also recognize that I'm actually here in place of our commissioner. She was drawn into another meeting this morning, didn't have quite the schedule worked out, so she let me know last night at 4 o'clock that I'd be here. So I grabbed a presentation, a PowerPoint that we had, and hopefully I didn't prune too heavily. We have a history of working on green infrastructure in the city, focused around many issues. I'm going to highlight a few of them, but the one that most residents of the city of Chicago recognize are basement flooding and our viaduct flooding. So this is a situation, this is a map of 311 complaints about basement flooding or flooded streets over a 4-year period. You can see, the density of this really in residential areas and areas of all kinds of need, but this becomes a real quality of life issue for the citizens of Chicago, and it's one that we've had many attempts to address. Some include green infrastructure and some don't. This is basically the situation we have. Most people have seen some image of this before. This is our combined sewer system. This is one of the strategies that we've implemented to address basement flooding in the combined sewer, and that's the restrictors that we placed into the catch basins. So you can see those, the small red boxes on either side of the street. That's a diagram of the street in the middle of the picture. But what restrictors do is it limits the amount of water that can enter those catch basins during heavy rain events, so that more of that water stays on the street, stays in the curb, stays at the intersection, and still allows flow from buildings, from drains that are inside buildings in the basement or at downspouts to actually go into the system through the combined sewer. So that's been one of our strategies. This, of course, had to be modified with time. This was a big strategy a decade ago. It's had to be slightly modified in time because there were places where actually keeping water on the street caused flooding on the street, which then actually found other places to go, which could be window wells, could be other inlets, which actually caused residential or structural flooding. So we've modified that. We've taken some out. We've added some. We've actually put some other kinds of restrictors into those catch basins. We've also done some darn big gray infrastructure solutions, working with, really, this is Metropolitan Water Reclamation's solution, the deep tunnel system, or the TARP. So at this point, the tunnel system is complete, but the reservoirs aren't. Only one reservoir is online, or one slightly online. So this is really an ongoing process. It's one way to solve our combined sewer system situation, but other cities, other municipalities are actually looking at this a little differently, and how can they really combine the gray and the green, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we've approached some of that this morning. This is a diagram. Folks have seen this. I really have to credit water management and our friend Pete Mulvaney. Many of you in the room know Pete. But this is a diagram which he uses to explain how we address stormwater in the city of Chicago. The LOS is our level of service. So what are we trying to capture and convey using our sewer infrastructure? The chart that you see, the frequency of storms is on the vertical, the intensity of storms is on the horizontal, and we have this chart of storms where we're addressing, our level of service is addressing, say, 90% of the kinds of rains that we have. It's the 10% that causes that basement flooding and causes the street flooding. Well, what we're finding, and especially in the face of climate change, is actually that intensity and frequency is moving to the right. So our level of service isn't keeping up with climate change. So our question then is, how do we move that red line, which is a dotted line at this point, to the right to increase our level of service in the face of climate change? And it could be land use change, could be a number of other stressors on our system. And that's where we get we look to green infrastructure as being one part of the solution and moving that line from the left to the right. And here's a number of those solutions which we have promoted, which we have implemented, which we have incentivized within the city of Chicago, and which could be on the plate for this new grant opportunity. So this just gives you a quick rundown. We're talking about simple solutions like downspout disconnections, which seem simple, but when you try to do it at scale or you try to address the code barriers that you may have, can be complicated. It includes rain gardens, which everyone can sit back and say, oh, there's a beautiful rain garden. It's addressing stormwater. It's bringing biodiversity benefits into my community. It has this. But when you have a very heavy rain event and that rain garden is already saturated from the rain event you had yesterday, they can be a little bit more challenging to maintain and also to think through the overflow necessities that garden will need. Rain barrel programs, very popular. Lots of municipalities have them. How can they be utilized? Permeable pavement. We have some of the leaders in permeable pavement in the room when you talk about Chicago Department of Transportation, some of the engineering firms that are here in the room that have looked at permeable pavement and not just the specs that are needed, the specifications that are needed to install permeable pavement, but really the operations and maintenance requirements that permeable pavement have over time. Bioswale. There's some similar concerns to rain gardens as far as where that overflow goes, but there's also there can be erosion issues with bioswales as you're trying to convey water through those swales. There can be other issues just in time with the maintenance and upkeep and aesthetics. Cisterns, we mentioned some of the rain harvesting situations with rainwater. We not only having and collecting rainwater for irrigation purposes, but actually trying to take that rainwater back into buildings for use, flushing toilets, slop sinks, things like that. Filter strips, how do we create buffers alongside areas if we're trying to get water from impervious to pervious surfaces. Green roofs, we've been known as a leader in green roofs. I'll talk more about that in a second, and detention basins. So it's not just the stormwater benefits. I want to suggest that green infrastructure is very clear in this context of what we're meaning, and we're really focusing on stormwater, but we need to recognize that green infrastructure can have many other definitions. It can be the network of preserves and parks and open spaces that's used for habitat benefits, that's used for air quality, that's used for urban heat island benefits. I just want to recognize that because I think it's something that we quickly gloss over in getting towards stormwater as the definition. While I think it's clear in this context, we need to be careful whenever we're having these discussions, especially with individuals that aren't comfortable with these conversations. The ability to reuse water in landscape, rainwater as a non, as a first choice for landscape material, for plant material, for trees to be healthy. Urban heat island effect, and then also all the energy that goes along. And this slide really talks to that. Climate change, of course, is a focus. The Chicago Climate Action Plan was launched in 2008. We just had our progress report 2 weeks ago. If you haven't seen the progress report for the city's Climate Action Plan or 2-year check-in, I think you'll be impressed with some of the progress we've made, also some of the work we need to do so we can meet our 2020 target. But water, when it comes to climate change, really, when it comes to our mitigation benefit, is about pumping. It's about moving water, and it's about the carbon emissions that are related to the energy that goes into those pumps. Now, it also has an impact, of course, on precipitation, how we adapt to future precipitation levels, like Michigan levels, flooding concerns, and those are all pieces that we're working on from an ecosystem approach, but also from a real building and street infrastructure approach. How are we going to adapt to future precipitation events, more extreme, more flashy events, as people say. Also, how are we going to adapt to a lowered lake level? There's forecast to be the lake to be somewhere, pardon me, about 1 foot to 2 feet lower at the end of this century. For me, as a manager who manages lands in the Calumet region, that means my marshes dry out. That means that the groundwater that feeds those wetlands is gone or has dropped significantly. So if I'm putting infrastructure in, I need to do that on a timeline to meet that lake level drop. So we've had some success in putting water control structures in to keep water on those marshes, but we need to make sure that that infrastructure we put in is placed at the right height so that it's actually pulling water from this new lake level. we've done a lot. You can find all these reports. Everything that I'm talking about is available on the city's website. Anything from the climate action plan work to our water agenda, our stormwater best management practices. We have a document which many people haven't seen, which is called Adding Green to Urban Design. Highlights a lot of the work we've done around green infrastructure, and even going as far back as our environmental action agenda in 2005 and 2006. Some real specific successes: stormwater management ordinance that's passed in the city in 2008, really focused on rate and volume, and really focused on sort of development of properties over about 4 city lots. And that's how we capture those properties. But you can see some of those targets. The reason I put this one in here is just to say that the manual to the stormwater management ordinance, again, some folks in the room worked on this for us, has a lot of really terrific both engineered specs, but also calculators and other engineering calculators that could be of use as you're planning your project towards this grant. That might be something you look to as a resource. I know the US EPA has some other resources. Groups like CNT and others have created green infrastructure calculators, but I just wanted to point to this as one, especially if you're working here in the city, might be a useful resource, the Stormwater Management Ordinance Manual. Here's some more examples of some projects, both designed and in place. We have the Center for Green Technology, North Park Village Rain Garden Project. We work with Department of General Services, who is here. This is actually one, the swale at 130th and Torrance, as we were redesigning the intersection of 130th and Torrance, which actually has, it's a big project of Department of Transportation here, where you've got railroads, you've got major streets intersecting 2 rails that cross at grade currently, dropping the roadway below grade, keeping one railway at grade and taking one rail above grade. It's a big infrastructure project, but we took it up as an opportunity to actually handle all the stormwater that falls on that intersection and put it through this swale that you can see designed, and then to release it into the Calumet River, which is right there, just about half a mile to the west of that intersection. Green roofs, as I said, we've done a lot to promote, incentivize, mandate green roofs, anything from grants programs to this matrix, which I know you can't see, but which is available on our website, which is our sustainable design policy, which actually mandates green roofs. If you're getting any sort of city assistance, TIF or density bonuses or anything, you have to put green roofs on your project. Cisterns, we've had some success installing cisterns. These are a few of the projects at parks and at city facilities. That one that's actually just a rendering is now actually installed. The Kilbourne Park greenhouse cistern is there. There's also one at Garfield Park Conservatory, Independence Park Bungalow, I think has some, and Marquette Park. And then monitoring, really going in and counting the beans afterwards. We need to find out if we are successful or not. We worked with Hay Associates to monitor a few different sites, Green Alleys, CCGT, the Household Chemical Computer Recycling Facility, and CDOT, I know, has been working closely on their Sustainable Streets program to really get monitoring as a vital part of that project, which just started construction recently. This is what I wanted to highlight just from a gray infrastructure part, because there may be times where green infrastructure isn't the solution. This was the addition to McCormick Place that went on a few years ago, and we captured that water that came off that new roof, which would have gone into our combined sewer system. And while we do have a first flush system, which captures that first flush, I don't actually know the volume off this roof or the depth of the water that comes off that's captured in the first flush and does go into our sewer system. The rest of it goes directly out into Lake Michigan. So it's getting the water where it wants to go in the first place. So I think that's an important thing to look at. This is really a gray solution. This is all pipes and pumps. But I just wanted to highlight that sometimes green infrastructure isn't the solution. Our Green Alley project, our program has been, lauded far and wide, articles in New York Times, articles in many engineering magazines, but this is really transitioning, and I apologize, I don't have a graphic for it, to the Sustainable Streets program, Cermak, Blue Island, which CDOT, as I said, is installing right now, taking these same technologies, but even taking it up a step. So looking at many other walkability features, looking at many other sort of materials use, the kinds of creative materials used. They've added additives into the concrete, into the paving. They've changed the lighting types. Those additives actually allowed them to drop the candle per foot. What is it?
Foot candles.
Foot candles. So that they can. Sorry, you've got some experts right here that have worked on this project, obviously. But it's really a neat way of how we can take some of these green infrastructure technologies and put them into our public right-of-ways. For us as the city, it really gets to, okay, great, so City of Chicago, you can do these projects, you have the budget, but how do you get these words out there? So these are some of the examples, anywhere from downspout disconnect program to a rain barrel program to our rain gardens program, which we did in Norwood Park, installed by Green Corps Chicago, our community gardening and green job training program. How do we get these technologies out to homeowners? How do we disperse these technologies? And that's where we're really looking now, is how do we not just incentivize, but really provide education resources to homeowners. This is just a sort of cut through of how that can be done on a home, on a single family home, but we really need to be looking multi-units. We really need to be looking all across the landscape of our residential properties. Thanks, I went quickly because I knew many of you would be, okay, I've seen this before, and some of you would be like, okay, I need to spend more time in the details. So I went quickly. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them just from the City of Chicago perspective, but of course, this is really, I'm sure you're here wanting to hear from the state and the new program. So, thanks.